week 1 of the 8th season of the NWBA, and the drama is already in mid-season form. Vasser and Nico lock horns in an early season heavyweight bout, and can CJ sneak 2 wins in nail-biters against division opponents? Z and Keith take the stage on opening night. Which Max Cord mainstay grabs their first win of the season under the lights? Lots of game 3s and plays worthy of ZU, an active free agency, and even trades too. Hold on to your hats and check those stats. Week 1 of NWBA Wonder Room starts now. Hello everyone and welcome back to NWBA Wonder Room. I'm your host, King Vasser. Week 1 of the season has come and gone, which means it's finally back to our regular format, the one that you all know and most of you love. Going into the standings, power rankings, stats, Mons of the week, free agency, the schedule, all that, covering all business across the league. But first, going into the set recaps. In the past, we used to do this after all of the league coverage, but this season we're changing it up. We're going to do this at the top of the show, and we're also going to change up the format a little bit. We're going to focus more on the highlights of the sets in order to crunch down on time, but to compensate for the lack of play-by-play, we do have some additional stuff, so make sure you tune in and pay extra close attention. We're up in the ante this time around. So we've got versus Seeker action, Corway and Big Bluff going head to head. Terrakion and Cleaver the leads, and you can see right out of the gate we've got double scarf action. Neither Terrakion nor Cleaver going down, but this Terrakion is going to present quite a bit of a problem for Big Bluff. Bishop, the only one who can come in, but Keith does not know that this thing is scarfed in the first place. So Cleaver takes a bunch of damage, Torval takes a bunch of damage. It's going to take Azu to come in, so Terrakion gets off a lot of chip before it ever has to leave the battle. Goes into a Araquanid, takes up that Aqua Jet beautifully. So in comes Bishop. And that Surf does 41. If this is an Eviolite Bishop, that is an unholy amount of damage coming out from an Araquanid. We move to turn 11. Garchomp comes in on a Torkoal, but Keith calls out the bluff and gets up rocks before Araquanid picks up the first kill of the battle with that Bug Bud. So in comes Cleavor, who's going to go for another Stone Axe, but unfortunately is going to go down thanks to that Garchomp Rough Skin. So Big Bluff in an early hole. Azu comes out, and Garchomp has the poison jab coverage, so Azu goes down. So it's a 6-3 lead for Corway right out the gate. Keith goes for a Sludge Bomb on Venusaur, and we don't see Life Orb damage, so it's odd what this Venusaur's item might be. Later on, turn 19, Garchomp, Bishop terrors to avoid the EQ, gets off a huge crit on the Iron Head, and so the Sucker Punch is able to take out the Garchomp. Z tried to read the Terra with the SD, doesn't pay off. Gengar coming in, locking Bishop into Encore, which allows Mandibuzz to come in. Keith doubles out to Venusaur, and reveals that the Venusaur is sub, so this is one of the weirdest Venusaur sets we've ever seen. No Life Orb, no lefties, and it's Substitute. Gets off a couple Sludge Bombs, does poison the Mandibuzz, but unfortunately doesn't knock it out. So Mandibuzz is able to get off a roost, goes into Meloetta, and you can see that it's packing that AV. That Sludge Bomb only does 21, so even with the poison, the second Sludge Bomb not going to kill before Meloetta picks up the KO with the side shot before going down eventually to the poison. So we're getting into the end game of game 1. Araquanid, Bishop goes for the Throat Chop, goes down to that surprisingly strong Araquanid Surf. Ceruledge Poltergeist, revealing that the Araquanid is actually Specs. What insane call from Z. Shadow Sneak gets the crit, picks up the kill for Ceruledge, but the Bitter Blade not doing enough. Mandibuzz able to roost up, knowing that it's not going to KO from here. A second Bitter Blade, no crit, no nothing. Ceruledge goes down in one shot to a foul play. Corway takes game number 1. On to game 2, Venusaur the lead. Keith goes behind the sub, and then growths up. So it is Growth Venusaur, but it's no lefties, no Life Orb, sub-growth. Very odd choice here, and as we've seen before, AV Meloetta easily able to pick that off. A few turns later, Araquanid, or Azumarill, comes in on the foul play. So Araquanid has to come in on Azu, and that Banded play rough doing a ton of damage. Torkoal switches in. Araquanid misses the Hydro Pump, and then crucially misses a second one. So instead of picking up a KO on Torkoal, Torkoal KOs it back with a Lava Plume. Very unfortunate turn of events for Koei that ended up changing how this game too would progress. Torkoal able to get up rocks on the Meloetta, who goes for the knock, and then U-turns out into Mandibuzz. Gets burnt by the Will-O-Wisp. This will play a factor later. So Keith, taking advantage of the Mandibuzz default, goes into Azumarill to position himself for another KO, and Meloetta is going to have to be the victim this time, goes down to an Azu play rough. Later on, you've got Torkoal coming in on Garchomp. Z correctly Earthquakes. Keith knows he has to sack something, so he lets Torkoal go. Brings Azu back out. Takes that Poison Jab, and one-shot the Garchomp with Ice Punch. No play rough necessary. It's going to bring in Gengar, who's going to pick up the KO with the Shadow Ball, knowing that Azu is choice locked. This brings in Kleavor, who goes for a Stone Axe, but crucially misses on the Gengar, so Gengar gets a lot of chip with that Shadow Ball, and it proved out to be very important because the Gengar was sassed the entire time. So that Shadow Ball is going to pick up the KO on Kleavor. So out comes Ceruledge to try to somehow turn the remainder of the set around, but remember, Mandibuzz is burned, so it's not going to be able to do as much damage. Roos up to full first. Bisharp comes in, takes that knockoff very easily before taunting the Mandibuzz, trying to get this thing locked into some damage without being able to heal. So Keith gets off a couple of Iron Heads. Bisharp goes down to 31%. And then on the final turn of the taunt, doubles into Ceruledge, but this actually turned out to be a very genius play from Keith. Procs the weak armor, so Ceruledge now has the opportunity to pick up the KO on a very weakened Mandibuzz. Terrakion comes in. It's slower, despite the fact that it's scarfed, so it goes down to a Bisharp Sucker Punch after KOing Ceruledge, and because the rocks are up, Gengar has to go down, and that's game 2 for Big Bluff. Very well navigated endgame there by Keith. Game 3, Terrakion Torkoal the leads. Z takes the initiative, goes into Araquanid, blocks the Will-O-Wisp, and then Terra Water says, enough of the shenanigans, I want the sun gone now. Absolutely one-shots the Torkoal with that Surf. Later on, Meloetta gets a knock on Bisharp, not a good decision, gets hit with a Throat Chop, and then Keith wisely going for Iron Head KO, instead does a ton of chip to Terrakion. Goes for the Sucker Z, puts up the rocks on the choice set, but now that means Bisharp gets to get off more damage. Throat Chop does 40 to Garchomp, and then the Z tries to SD, gets hit with an Iron Head, keeps staying in, not fearing the Garchomp whatsoever. So now something else has to take a hit. Gengar gets off a Shadow Ball before getting knocked down to its sash through a Bisharp Throat Chop. And then on the Sucker Punch reveals Destiny Bond, and Keith says at this point, that's fine, I'll take that too. So Gengar and Bisharp both go down. Meloetta and Azu come in, and because Keith goes in Azu, he gets off an Aqua Jet, picks up another KO. Araquanid comes in, Venusaur is the switch. Araquanid missing another Hydro Pump, and this one was so important because the Sludge Bomb poisons, and you see 77%. This would have absolutely two-shot the Venusaur. Instead, Araquanid's gonna have to go down to that Sludge Bomb poison after finally taking out the Venusaur. Azu is the switch on death again, so something else has to go. This time it's Garchomp's turn to get sacked by an Aqua Jet. So Corway's down to Mandibuzz and Terrakion. Kleavor comes in, takes a foul play, doesn't get KO'd, is able to put up a Stone Axe, get nice damage on Mandibuzz before going down to another foul play. Azu comes in, and while the Mandibuzz is faster and able to get off the defog, Ozzy's going to pick up that KO with a play rough, which means it's all down to Terrakion with a Several Edge that has priority, and it's not even going to come down to that because Ozzy's not going to go down to the Rock Blast, picks up the final KO, and so Big Bluff on Prime Time gets their first win of the season. Azumarill 6 KOs, 11 points. Several Edge 3 KOs, 5 points. 5 different mons for Big Bluff to pick up 3 or more KOs. Great team win. Good effort from Coralway. Specs Araquanid stole the show, but unfortunately was not enough to steal the W. Lavender Town and Sky Pillar 2 early season favorites and heavyweights going at it. Zapdos G, the lead here for Lavender Town, gets that initiative. U-turns out into King Gambit and then doubles into the Rotom Wash as the Como comes out, and we see that the Rotom is actually Scarf tricks the Como, rocking it into substitute. So great plays here early from Nico, and thanks to some good positioning, is able to pick up the first KO of the battle as King Gambit takes out Como. Later on turn 14, Hydreigon comes in on a Rotom Wash Hydro Pump. We see the lefties, and then we see that the Hydra's also subbed, and this time able to take advantage, blocks the T-Wave, and then after some turns and some finagling, gets up to +4 with some nasty plots and takes out Wochen behind the sub. So that brings in Zapdos, has to U-turn to break it, and thanks to Heatran getting the blocks, takes a lot of chip. Rotom Wash comes in, gets popped by Legend's Dragon Pulse thanks to the crit. Hydra picks up another KO. Zapdos comes in, and even though it gets the KO on Hydra with the U-turn, is taking a ton of rocks chip. So Gambit comes in. Azelf comes out for Sky Pillar. Terra's Fairy U-turns out into Clodsire with the intention of sacking it so that Azelf can come in and pick up the KO. But after the Sucker Punch, crucial mistake here from Sky Pillar, accidentally clicked Psyshock instead of Dazzling Gleam, so now has to go into Heatran, and the Sucker Punch crits, so Heatran goes down, and Azelf has to take a ton of Sucker Punch chip before finally picking up the KO on King Gambit. So a terrible turn of events here for Sky Pillar. Zapdos comes out, and it's revealed that both Azelf and the Zapdos are Scarf, so Azelf picks up the KO. That allows Oricorio though to come in and start quiver dancing up. Sylveon, faced with a +2/+2/+2 Oricorio, roars it out. So Kieran has to come in, take Rocks chip. Sky Pillar here decides to make a judgment call, goes for the wish as we see the mixed no loaded dice Kieran, and you know that it's not dice because it only gets 2 hits on the next Ice Spear before going down to a Hyper Voice. So Sylveon, relatively healthy, and now it's just Oricorio, but with no way to roar this thing out. How is Vasser going to weather the Quiver Dance Storm? And as the Oricorio gets up to +2, you see that Hyper Voice is only doing 31%. And then Nico eventually reveals the roost, so it doesn't matter. Oricorio is going to pick up the Revelation Dance. Hit on Sylveon does 92%, no crit from the Hyper Voice. It's not going to matter. The next Revelation Dance picks up the KO, and it leaves just Azelf, who is too slow, gets hit with the next Revelation Dance. It's game 1 for Lavender Town. Game 2, Wochen comes in on Clodsire as it starts to get up the spikes and then misses multiple lead seeds. So that's 2 layers of spikes and the Toxic on a Wochen. Eventually, Wochen is able to pick up a KO on Heatran thanks to knockoff and lead seed, but it sustained so much damage thanks to that Clodsire. So is it really the Lavender Town advantage? Azelf comes in, picks up the KO on Wochen thanks to the U-turn. Sylveon comes out. Gambit comes in, has to take all that hazard damage thanks to Clodsire avoiding those leak seeds. Como comes in, blocks King Gambit, and then predicts that Gambit stays in, gets off the KO with a body press. Zapdos has to come in. This time, Lavender Town, somewhat on the back foot, has to get aggressive. Zapdos G presses Brave Bird, Sylveon takes a chunk, and then Como comes in and gets sapped. That's a lot of chip on Zapdos though. Azelf was able to come in, pick up the Revenge KO with the Dazzling Gleam. So now Oricorio comes in, Hydra is now the swap. Knowing that this thing is Terra Ground means that Revelation Dance isn't going to affect the Hydra, so Vasser thinks he has an opportunity to set up on this thing. But Nico, great team building, reveals that Alluring Voice and not Hurricane is the next move. So it ends up popping Hydra behind the sub. Quasar comes in, takes the Revelation Dance thanks to the Sugar Berry. It is unaware, gets off a Toxic. So Kieran comes in, gets all in the KO on Sylveon with the Icicle Spear. Azov comes in, Terra Fairies, but U-turns out, did not trust the damage on Dazzling Gleam, knowing that Azov is the only way that they would win this set. So Kieran picks up another KO, takes out Quagsire. It's down to Azov 1v3. How is Vasser going to pull off this one? Well, first, the Dazzling Gleam picks up the KO on Kieran. Rotom Wasp comes in next. Doesn't go down to the Dazzling Gleam, wisely goes for the Thunder Wave, and then stays in knowing that the best course of action is to let Azov get parried, but unfortunately Nico tries to get aggressive, and Ohio gets crit by the Dazzling Gleam, so now it's down to just Groudon, and just for good measure misses the Hydro Pump, so it's 1-1. We move to game number 3. On turn 6, Oricorio does not Terra, goes for the straight up Revelation Dance as Vasser tries to predict the Terra or switch or something, and then the second one picks up the KO. That's a huge lead for Lavender Town early, and then some good positioning later on allows Aqua to pick up a KO on Como with the Brave Bird, so it's now 6-4. Azov has to come in. Nico, now up in mines, sacks Kieran to the double Dazzling Gleam. So Azov picks up another KO in this set. Later on, Rotom able to paralyze Hydra. Volt switches into King Gambit. Vasser just goes for the Dragon Pulse. It's also Choice Lock, but is able to pick up the KO on Gambit. Oricorio comes in. Sylveon comes out. We've seen this song and dance before. So Oricorio getting a +1 and then getting some chip before Sylveon roars it out. Draws Chinchino, and this actually ended up being the death knell for Sky Pillar's chances. Double tidy up on the Chinchino. Heatran goes for the Lava Plume, does not get the burn, and then more great team building. Chinchino revealing Aqua Tail, so it takes out the Heatran. Triple Axel connects, Hydra goes down, and just for good measure, Nico going for the Terra Ice to make extra sure that Azov and Sylveon will both get taken out from here. And so that is a Game 3 Chinchino sweep for Lavender Town. Starts the season off 1-0 in the Game 3 victory. Chinchino and Oricorio both 4 KOs each. Great game from Azov, 8 KOs, 14 KOs, but it's not enough. Lavender Town takes the victory over Sky Pillar. Kitakami and Sky Pillar. Sky Pillar coming off that loss to Lavender Town. How would they fare in their second set? We see the leads Azov and Thunder's Eye. And you're going to see some crazy stuff from Kitakami coming out this set. Manual Electric Terrain, Thunderous Incarnate, Cork Drive, Attack, Iron Leaves, Electric Seed, Gargasol. It was insane seeing what Kitakami tried to cook up to combat this team. But one of the biggest issues that they faced was with this Terra Fairy Sylveon. You see the fake out Life Orb Raichu Alola come out. Alomola takes 41 from a Hyper Voice. That smells like a Salt Vest. Como comes in, doesn't get the speed drop from the Icy Wind, so you know that it's Covert Cloak, but you see that the Alomola has Play Rough, so CJ pulling up all the stops in the team builder to try to combat this team. Turn 17, Como. Finally, the first KO of the battle goes down to a Serena Triple Axel. Azov comes in, gets off the big damage with the U-turn, goes into Magma Zone, takes the knockoff. Guard comes in, Mag puts up a Reflect, gets some big chip thanks to the Flash Cannon, he gets this Spadef drop, takes the Salt Cure, no cloak on the Mag, you saw that the Chopper Berry got knocked off, so Magazone's going to go down here, and Kitakami is going to take a 6-4 lead early. But again, this Sylveon proved to be a big thorn in the side of Kitakami. Those Terra Fairy boosted Hyper Voices were doing a ton of damage. Sylveon here, eating up a +2 Thunderbolt from Raichu Alola, gets off the Wish. And then Vasser wisely hedges going into the CGY. Even though it gets parried by the Thunderbolt, it's going to take out the Alola Raichu thanks to the Life Orb chip and heal the CGY quite nicely. E-Terrain comes out again from Thundurus, then U-turns out into Serena, but the CGY is able to pick up the KO with the Spirit Shackle. So Leaves comes in, and now it's time to play the Sack War. Psyblade takes out the CGY. Azelf comes in. Mola gets knocked, revealing that it is in fact Assault Vest. Sylveon comes in, takes the Scald. Even though it gets burned, it's not going to go down just yet to an Alomomola move. Picks up the KO with the Hyper Voice, which brings Iron Leaves back in. You can see that this is also Terrain Extender on that Thundurus. But CJ made a bit of a misplay, goes for the Psyblade instead of the Leaf Blade, so it's not going to pick up the KO on Azelf. Gets the KO with the knockoff, revealing that it's Scarf Booster Attack. Thundurus Eye comes in, gets knocked off, goes straight for the KO on Azelf, which is the smart play, so it's down to just Lycanroc. But CJ, for whatever reason, does not go for the Thunder Wave, so now a weakened guard comes in, but the first Stone Edge misses. CJ goes for a recover. The second Stone Edge lands. CJ does not go for the Iron Defense. Body Press is not going to KO, so Lycanroc gets one more shot and misses it to the left again. So despite all of Kid Akami's best efforts to throw away the game, they do in fact take the first one off of two Stone Edge misses. We move the game to Magnezone goes down early thanks to a Salt Cure from guard, gets up the Reflect, and it proves to be a bit of a boon here for Sky Pillar. Hydra, the swap for Como, gets off the U-turn, and you can see that the CGY doesn't take all too much from the Serena triple axle behind the Reflect. And eventually, even though Serena lands all of her triple axles, she does go down to another Spirit Shackle from the CGY. Thundurus comes in, gets the KO with the Thunderbolt. So that sends in Hydreigon. Thundurus U-turns out into Alomomola, but even an AV Mola can't do much about a Specs Draco Meteor coming out from Hydreigon. So Garg is going to have to be the sack on the second Meteor. Hydra takes care of that. And then later on turn 13, Sylveon's going to Terra again, and this time the Hyper Voice gets the crit on Raichu Alola. So now Sky Pillar has the advantage in the Sack War game. Sylveon goes for another Hyper Voice, does a clean 40 to Alomomola, who can only do its best to try to slow down this Sylveon. Doesn't get nearly enough chip thanks to that leftovers. Hyper Voice picks up the KO for Sylveon. That brings in Thundurus Eye, who goes for the Electric Terrain. He's going to try to put it all on the back of Iron Leaves. And yet CJ U-turns out, leaving Iron Leaves to take all of this chip. Or does it? Vasser wisely going for the Wish, revealing the Smart Strike from the Iron Leaves. But because of that Wish, Sylveon is able to hang on after the second Smart Strike, barely living at 3%, picking up the KO on Iron Leaves, leaving just Thundurus Eye by itself. And while it does take care of that Sylveon, it doesn't have recourse for the Bandit Lycanroc Exarrock in the back. So Sky Pillar takes game 2. We move on to game 3, and right out the gate, Serena Power crits the Sylveon that has proven to be such a thorn in Kid Akami's side, all set. So an absolutely huge advantage here for Kid Akami in game 3. Eventually, Serena goes down to the same CGY Spirit Shackle behind Reflect. Mimikyu comes in, picks up the Shadow Sneak KO, the swap for guard. So here comes Mag, puts up a Reflect in front of the Mimikyu SD, and because of that, it's able to live the first Drain Punch, get off the discharge, break the Mimikyu to size, and then live the second Drain Punch on just 2% HP. So Flash Cannon is going to put the KO on Mimikyu, tie this game up. Raichu Alola comes in, gets off the Fake Out, takes care of Magnezone, so now it's 4-3. After some back and forth trying to get some positioning, Lycanroc, very damaged, takes care of Alomomola, goes down to an Iron Leaves close combat. That's going to bring in Azelf, goes for U-turn into Hydra. At this point, it's 3-2. There's not much left that Sky Pillar can do. Thundurus Incarnate is able to get off the Electric Terrain. Iron Leaves comes back in, picks up the KO on the Hydra with a close combat, and at this point it doesn't matter what move it pressed as long as it took Hydra out of the paint, because a second CC isn't enough to KO the Azelf, who picks the KO with the knockoff, but it is going to allow Raichu Lola to come in, thanks to that Surge Surfer ability, outspeed Scarf Azelf and pick up the final KO, and so Kitakami picks up their win. Iron Leaves holds it down, 4 KOs, 8 points, and unfortunately, Sky Pillar finds themselves 0-2 to start the season. Vasser now just 3-8 all time in week 1s. Our final big recap: Anastar versus Kitakami. Anastar's first match of the season. Right out the gate, we see more team building shenanigans from Kitakami. Magic Room coming out from Yuxi, but Anastar's not playing games. Alolan Sandslash coming through with that Slush Rush, and then Terra Waters on the close combat, knowing that Iron Leaves does actually outspeed Slush Rush, Sandslash, and picking up the first kill of the battle with the triple axle. So good work there from Anastar. Thunderous Eye comes in and immediately U-turns out on Goodra into Mimikyu to try to get this party started for Kitakami. Mimikyu immediately going for the +2, gets knocked off, but that's fine. Disguise eats a hit as always, and the Play Rough on turn 6 is going to take out that Goodra to tie this game up. We move to turn 8, where Alomomola gets off a soak on Ursaluna, but even if you take away Ursaluna's stab, it's not going to prevent Amon from being taken off the senses, and Yuxi, the unfortunate victim of that +2 Ursaluna facade. Moving on to turn 18. After some positioning, Thunder's Theory gets off a Volt Switch on Mimikyu to bring Alolan Sandslash back in under the snow, gets off another +2, and the Play Rough plus the Shadow Sneak from Mimikyu is not going to take out the Alolan Sandslash, gets the KO with the triple axle, which will bring in Alomomola, tries to go for a Wish. Sandslash settles for some decent chip on Alomomola. Flip turns out, but because of the Terra Water, still does not pick up the KO on Alolan Sandslash, and now Thunderous Eye has to go down to a triple axle. Eventually, turn 28, Slow King G is able to Chilly Reception out into Thunder's Therian. He gets off a big Thunderbolt, which is able to take out Alomomola, so it's down to just Serena, and even though it's able to pick up a KO on Thunder's Therian, thanks to some rapid spins and a triple axle, it does not prevent its inevitable demise at the hands of Slowking G with the Sludge Wave, not the Sludge Bomb. Game 2, crucial juncture. CJ calls out the Terra immediately with the Iron Leaves, picks up that KO with the Leaf Blade, and immediately flips their fortune in Game 2. Later on, after a Trick Room, we see come out from Anastar, Slowking able to Chilly Reception out into Goodra, which is going to take the triple axle from Serena, so it's going to be another sack and tie this one up at 5, but because of the Trick Room is up, it is not 5-5. Ursaluna gets to come out to play, immediately goes for the Heavy Slam, predicting the Mimikyu, but that Future Sight's going to deal great chip to Alomomola, and then Flare not going to predict on the next turn, takes out Mola with the Facade. Then on turn 20, Thunder's Therian is in, Volt Switch is out on Thunder's Incarnate, brings in Greninja, reveals itself as Protean, picks up the K with the Surf, but only after Kitakami gets up the E-Train, which means it's time for Iron Leaves to do its business. Thunder's Therian has to be the sack here, goes down to a Side Blade, and then Flare, maybe a calculation error, thinks that Slowking G can eat that Side Blade up. It cannot, so that's 2 Mons down. Greninja has to come in now, gets off the U-turn on Rabombi, brings in Ursaluna, which is already down to 37% after the burn, and even though Rabombi Moonblast does not pick up the KO, it does do enough to KO the Ursaluna after getting KO'd itself by a Heavy Slam. So it's down to just Greninja 1v3, and Serena more than bulky enough to take that Surf before taking out Greninja with a Power Whip. So we move now to the Game 3, tied 1-1, and this is one of the greatest examples of unmitigated dog that we have seen in NWBA history. CJ swinging for the fences right out of the gate, Terra Watering the Mimikyu, and it's not gonna stop at +4. No, CJ goes all the way up to +6 on the Fortress, which was the swap for Goodra. It brings in Thunder's Therian, which goes down to a Shadow Sneak because this Mimikyu is Life Orb. This is gonna bring Fortress back in, which does not go down to the Drain Punch, but unfortunately Drain Punch is gonna heal Mimikyu damn near up to full. Another calculation error here from Flare, tries to Iron Defense up. Fortress goes down to the next Drain Punch. So Slowking G has to come in, and all the switching in the world won't matter. You can go to Ursaluna on the Shadow Sneak, you can go to Slowking G on the Drain Punch, but at some point, CJ has too much HP, he's just gonna plus Play Rough, it's gonna take Slowking G out of the game. Greninja's gonna come in, and the Protean U-turn is not gonna do nearly enough to KO the Mimikyu, which is able to heal right back up to full after taking out a Alolan Sandslash with another Drain Punch. And this, ladies and gentlemen, is in fact the game. The Protean Dark Pulse does not get the flinch, Greninja goes down, and so Kitakami turns a Game 3 into a 12-turn 6-0 at the hands of Mimikyu. And so Kitakami will move to 2-1 on the season, 7 total KOs for Mimikyu, 13 points. Good effort there from Anastar, but unfortunately Flare, who historically is now just 1-7 in week 1, will see their week 1 woes continue for yet another season. First match of the season goes to Maulville in a 2-1 nail-biter. Evergreen cleans up in game 3. Iron Valiant leads the charge with 9 points. Spirit Pillar takes out Humalao on opening night. Oracle Bile 18 points in dominant fashion. Spirit Pillar would finish the week 3-0 after taking out Hearthome in a 3-game set. Oricorio gets the job done in game 3, but Great Tusk led the way with 11 points. Hearthome would also find themselves in a 3-game war with Mount Steel, but Mount Steel would emerge victorious for their first win of the season. Laias put up 11 points in that hard-fought battle. Third time was the charm, however, for Hearthome, picking up their first win of the season in their final set of week 1. Yanmega 13 points, forcing Goldenrod to submit in game 3. Anastar and Haoli in their first matches of the season. Greninja 7 points leads Anastar to the 2-1 victory. Humalao takes care of Goldenrod, Barraskewda and Caesar teaming together. Barraskewda with 14 points in the 2-game victory between needed rivals. Maulville picks up the victory over Mount Steel to ruin their bid to go undefeated in week 1. Both teams finished 2-1 during the week. Reuniclus 17 points in the set after multiple Calm Mind Store Power sweeps. Very well done by Maulville. Elsewhere, Haoli picks up their first win in franchise history, taking out Big Bluff 2-1. Toxtricity picks up 8 points behind some boom burst offense. Finally, in the last set of the week, Big Bluff moves to 2-1 over Anastar, who falls to 1-2. Venusaur getting it done in the clutch. 14 total points for Big Bluff to go 2-1. Alright, we hope you all enjoyed our new and hopefully improved set recap section, and now let's get into the standard league coverage. Of course, that's the standings after week 1, power rankings after week 1, the stats leaderboard, Pokemon of the week, a returning section that you all know and love and hopefully are excited to see return to Wonder Room. Starting as usual with the Ruby League, Lavender Town sits alone at the top 3-0, the only undefeated in the Ruby League, and for the second season in a row, Nico was pulled off an undefeated week 1. 3-0 record, of course, 6-1 in the game count, and a big +20 win differential that is #1 mark in the entire league. Rose Tower sits at 2-1, currently in second place thanks to their game count tiebreaker. They sit at 4-2 with a win differential of +7, while Kitakami and Big Bluff sit at the 4-3 spots, both 4-4 in games and a negative win differential, but 2-1 is 2-1. Sky Pillar, a bit surprisingly, sitting at 1-2, also with a 4-4 game count, and notably a positive win differential sitting at +4, which is why they currently occupy the number 5. Anastar and Holy also 1-2. Anastar 4-5 in games, Holy 3-4, both with a win differential of -3. And then in last place you got Corway, the only team that did not come away with a win in week 1 in the Ruby League. 1-6 in games, so it wasn't a total wash, but -20 win diff, that is bottom mark in the entire league. Over on the Sapphire side, things may look familiar. That's because both leagues have the exact same win-loss record all the way down, which is very surprising. You've never seen that happen before in league history. At the top, you've got Spear Pillar, 3-0, 6-1 game count, much like Lavender Town, and a +15 win differential. Humalau, Marville, and Mount Steel all sit at 2-1. Humalau 4-2 in the game count, Marville 4-4, Mount Steel 5-3, but Marville is over Mount Steel by virtue of their head-to-head tiebreaker win, and then Humalau above both teams by virtue of game count. Heart Home, Goldenrod, and Castelia City all sitting at 1-2. Heart Home getting the win over Goldenrod, and both teams having a better game count than Castelia City is why they sit 5, 6, 7 in the standings in that order. Notably, Heart Home played 9 games in week 1. They played all 3 sets going to game 3, and they have a +/0 win differential, so dead even. Goldenrod sitting at -8, Castelia City sitting at -2, and then in last place you got Literally sitting at 0-3, 1-6 in game count, so thankfully nobody got 6-0'd this week, but sitting at a -16 win differential, not what you want to see out the gate. It's the return of the weekly power rankings with a brand new look. We start at the top as we always do. Lavender Town sitting at spot number 1, and the big note on them, sweeping potential deadly. Cinchino, Oricorio Pow, and Necrozma all put in big work this week. Kieran and King Gambit hasn't even had to put up crazy numbers, had to put in a lot of work. Iron Moth hasn't even played a game yet for this team. The fact that they are 3-0 and at the top of the power rankings lets you know just how dangerous their offense is, and the same can be said for number 2, Spear Pillar. Great Tusk and Oricorio Baile have put in a lot of work. That funnel offense has been cooking early, not necessarily pressing every button on the soda fountains for Blade, just going in, picking his spots, and capitalizing greatly. Rose Tower sits at spot number 3. The early Diancie has proven to be a worthwhile investment. It was one of the best mons all week, numbers-wise, and has formed a very strong dynamic duo with Meowscarada. Humalau sits at spot number 4. Barraskewda, the carry, might be the case, but it matters not if you don't know how to stop it, and 2 of the teams that Humalau faced this week weren't able to. That's why they sit in spot number 4. Marville creeps up to number 5. Is their good start being overlooked? Reverum and Reuniclus have formed a pretty strong top 2 to start the season. Lycanroc Dusk already looks like a very strong 2020 candidate. No one's really talking about this team, but we've certainly noticed their good start. A team that they beat, Mount Steel, sitting at spot number 6. Terraladias has been overwhelmingly strong for this team. It's why they sit at 2-1. We don't know how many more games it's going to play this season, but when it is going to hit the field, it's going to be one of the hardest Pokemon to deal with. Kitakami sitting at spot number 7, capitalizing on chances, whether that be mistakes for their opponents in the team building. Doesn't really matter how it happens as long as you find a way to capitalize, which Kitakami has. Mimikyu and Iron Leaves both putting together 2 weeks, maybe surprisingly, but either way, Kitakami sitting in a good spot. Sky Pillar, maybe surprisingly, sitting at spot number 8 despite having a losing record, because analytically speaking, they had a pretty solid week 1. Obviously, 1-2 record is not what you want to have, but they've hung around in games. They took Lavender Town to game 3, the only team to do that this week. They don't look awful. The start hasn't been great, but we've seen time and time again far worse starts turn into something special, so Sky Pillar still doing okay. Big Bluff, the big word at spot number 9, locking in late game. Hasn't always been pretty throughout the first week, but Keith has been able to manage his endgame situations fairly well. Cerulege getting the game 3 win on prime time. Venusaur taking care of Anastar. 2-1, can't complain. As long as you make that top 10, doesn't really matter where you sit power ranking wise, right? Speaking of spot number 10, Heart Home sitting there. The big words, toughness should prevail. Heart Home, one of 2 teams that have played 9 games, meaning all 3 of their sets in week 1 went to game 3. Sitting at 1-2, but if just a few turns go differently, we could be talking about a team that might be 3-0. So for Ball Heat, the key is to hang in tough, keep fighting, and eventually the numbers will tell you that their fortune is going to flip sooner rather than later. The same can be said for Anastar sitting at spot number 11, but their big words, trust in Gliscor, played just 1 game for the faction in the first week of the season. One of those sets, it did get banned, but at the same time, we're talking about one of the most obnoxious defensive mons in the entire metagame. A bit surprised to see a mon that strong only hit the field for a single game in week 1. Sitting at spot number 12, you got Haoli. The big key to remember their mid-set swaps. Didn't really see too much of that from Haoli in week 1, and a few swaps might have went a long way, but still a new player getting adjusted to the new format. These things take time. Let's not worry about where we sit after week 1, right? Let's worry about where we sit at after week 3. Same can be said for Castelia City, sitting at spot number 13. Their adjustments are going fine, right? 2-4 in games, 1-2 in set. Newcomers typically struggle, so the fact that they've already got a win under their belt is a pretty good sign. Just got to keep at it. Goldenrod, all the way down at 14. The question, is it rustiness or is it the roster? We know that Dom has not been afraid to change his roster drastically in the past. It's up to him to figure out whether it is the roster. Wasn't really too big a fan of how his draft went, so we'll see what changes he opts to make between weeks 1 and 2. But again, he has to decide whether it's the team or him that's responsible for a underwhelming, we'll say, week 1. Spot number 15 belongs to Leaderboard. Where the hell is Satitan? Only 1 single game, obviously. Something has gone awry. The whole point was that this team drafted this mon, made it a Terra captain, and yet we've only seen it play 1 set and only 1 game at that. Bit of a surprise. And sitting in the final spot, you've got Corway, another 0-3 team. Big words, avoid the snowballing. Obviously, Z is a player that when he gets the momentum rolling, he can be a very strong player. We saw in the back half of Season 6, him put together a crazy run that almost resulted in a playoff berth. If he can just limit the bleeding in games, his team would be a lot better off for it, and we'd like to think that wins for Corway are going to come much sooner than they did for them in Season 6. We also welcome the return of the stats leaderboard for the uninitiated. The top 5 or so mons in each of the major scoring categories will get highlighted, and we start with Barrascuda, the KO leader on week 1, 13 KOs for Humalau, Gladios of Mount Steel, and Orcorio Baile of Spear Pillar, both clocking in with 12, Cinchino of Lavender Town, as well as Infernape of Heart Home, Masquerada of Rose Tower, and Venusaur of Big Bluff, all notching 11 KOs. Lycanroc Dusk, a surprising name, the assist leader in week 1 with 8, Heatran of Sky Pillar, and Rhyperior of Humalau with 6, as well as King Lou for Rose Tower, and then Landers Therian of Howley, Samurai H of Goldenrod, Swampert of Littleroot, and Thunderous Therian of Anstar, all putting together 5 assists in the week. Barrascuda was also the points leader on week 1, Latios with 23, Orcorio Baile with 22, Masquerada of Rose Tower with 20, and then Azelf of Sky Pillar, Cinchino, and Diancie of Rose Tower, all putting together 19. Glamora is your points per game leader in week 1. It played exactly 1 game and yet notched 3 KOs, 2 assists, and did not die a single time, meaning that even with 1 game played, that's enough to be the points per game leader in week 1. Necrozma of Lavender Town put together 6.5 points per game. Once again, only played 1 set and put up big numbers in that set. The aforementioned Barrascuda in 3rd with 6. Rayuniclus of Mauville putting together 5.7 points per game. And then the aforementioned Diancie getting 4.8. And then lastly, for KOs per game, Necrozma is the clubhouse leader in week 1, 3.5. Barraskewda behind it at 3.3. Glamora and Rayuniclus both coming up 3 flat. And then Diancie and Entei of Castelia City putting together 2.5. Your Ruby League Pokemon of the Week for week 1 is Diancie of the Rose Tower Copperajahs. It was a tough battle. There were a lot of other mons in contention like Meowscarada, Azelf, and Chinchino, but Diancie walks away with the win. 10 KOs was tied for 4th in the Ruby League. 19 points was tied for 2nd in the Ruby League. But the decider was its 4.8 points per game and 2.5 KOs per game, both of which were 2nd in the Ruby League behind only Necrozma, who did not play more than a single set. So ultimately, Diancie, by virtue of being pretty good in multiple sets, forced a forfeit, gets the stats, gets the wins, and gets the award. The Sapphire race was also a tough one to decide, but that honor goes to Barraskewda of the Humalile Swim Team. 13 KOs and 24 points were both tops in the entire league over the course of the week, and its 6 points per game was 3rd in the NWBA, and its 3.3 KOs per game was 2nd in the NWBA. So once again, there were some other sweepers to consider, Latias or Corio Baile, but Barraskewda put up bigger numbers than all of them and with better efficiency. So Barraskewda, the deserving winner for your Sapphire League Week 1 Pokemon of the Week.
Boy, it's out the mud. We got
ZU moment of the week.
What the fuck was that?
You're smoking dust.
Back by popular demand, we had to listen to the people. We couldn't keep it away. ZU moment of the week makes its grand return, and boy howdy do we have a doozy to start the season. So Castelia City and Little Root. Longtime viewers may have already noticed what the issue here is. If you look closely at Castelia City's team, Rillaboom, Corviknight, Regieleki, what do all 3 of those mons have in common? They're all OUs. That is a violation of the battle conduct rules, but that is not even why we're here, and it didn't really matter because AZ was content to let Ubo rock this out. So let's get into the actual match, right? It's been a long set. Little Root is trying to position themselves for a Titan sweep. So we see here, after a few sacks, we get to turn 40. It's time. Titan goes for the belly drum. Peck switches in. And then on the next turn, Titan belly drums again. No, this is not a misclick. This is not a misplay. There aren't any weird speed tier shenanigans going on with Toxapex and Titan. That is a Titan that is choice locked into belly drum because AZ's greedy ass forgot to take choice ban off of the Titan set. We've seen a lot of flubs in the team builder. We've seen a lot of weird shit in the team builder. Old, long-time fans will remember all the way back in Season 2, we saw Choice Specs Protect on a Nihilego, but Banded Belly Drum is a new one. Genuinely a new one. Never before seen. Levels of greed that I don't even think the Bible has room for. So for all of you who were asking, clamoring, begging, pleading for ZU Moment of the Week to finally return, you got what you asked for, because I really don't know how we can go lower than this. We head now to the free agency section of today's episode. Obviously, roster overhaul, one of the biggest parts of any season. Just about every GM goes through it, and while the preseason didn't feature a lot of moves, week 1 was pretty active this season, and we've even gotten a few trades. Normally trades don't really happen until about week 3 or 4, closer to the deadline, but this season we've got 2 massive ones coming just off the heels of the first 3 matches of the season. As we alluded to earlier, it was a very active and healthy week 1 of free agency. We start with Spear Pillar releasing Glamora to sign Cobalion initially, and then releasing Cloyster to sign Glamora. This does make a lot of sense. The Cobalion signing obviously gives Spear Pillars some nice defense. Hazard Setters got Volt Switch to turn around. But Glamora on the whole offers better hazard stacking and hazard removing capabilities than Cloyster does, while also still being a very strong offensive presence. So Good on Blaze to recognize that Gamora is still a very good Pokemon, and he doesn't want to just let that thing go for free. Skypillar, on the other hand, releases Ambipom to sign Snorlax, wants to lean into that defensive playstyle, wants to lean into that bulk. So they opt to get rid of Ambipom to sign the big special wall in PU, making it a Terra Captain in types with Ground and Fairy, both very strong defensive types as we've seen over the years. Rose Tower releases Torterra to sign Gallade, wants a faster RU Terra Captain. Makes a lot of sense. Torterra needs a Shell Smash to really get its offense going. Otherwise, it's just going to sit there and be slow, even if you do make it offensive. Gallade, obviously a lot faster, especially with a Choice Scarf. M, because it's a Terra Captain, Terra types in Electric and Fighting. Not really sure what that Electric's about. We don't really think Thunder Punch boost is that important, but we do like to see Fighting to get extra damage on moves like Close Combat. Himalaya releases Florges to sign Toxicroak, opts to get rid of a pretty solid special wall to sign a mon that directly benefits from the rain. Toxicroak has that dry skin. We've seen it be a staple on rain teams in past generations. Big Bluff opts to release Talonflame to sign Donphan, figures that a Rapid Spinner is better hazard control than a Defogger, and Donphan has some good bulk on both sides and crucially does not need to wear heavy duty boots to be effective. Following that, Corway releases Decidueye H to sign Mudsdale, so opting for better defense on the PU side and making Mudsdale a Terra Captain in Water and Fighting. Obviously, Water is a good defensive typing, but Fighting in particular means that Mudsdale now gets stab boosted body presses, so good on Corway to make that decision. Skypillar dips back into the pool, opts to once again improve their defense, releasing Magnezone to sign Cresselia. Both on paper kind of do the same thing, be bulky, throw up screens, T-Wave things, but Cresselia has self-healing and also has Lunar Dance to potentially bring something else back from the brink of death, so that is a direct upgrade in the defense department for RU. Little Root decides to sign the release Talonflame and opts to get rid of Mienshao. This one is a bit of a surprise. Mienshao, a good offensive mon, but Talonflame gives something that Little Root didn't have in the past, and that's hazard control. Goldenrod then immediately picks up Mienshao and releases Porygon Z. This is interesting for the sole fact that now Goldenrod is operating with 3 Terra Captains instead of 4, so now they have 5 Terra points just kind of sitting in the ether. We'll see if they opt to sign an RUmon in the future and use their Terra points there. Big Buff then makes a second transaction, getting rid of Basket Legion M for Belly Bolt. Basket Legion M didn't play any games for them in week 1, and on a Sun team is kind of the odd mon out. Belly Bolt, good defense, one of the few mons that isn't a poison type that can use Toxic, and has very annoying abilities both in Static and Electromorphosis, so that's a good defensive pickup for Big Bluff. Corey then makes another PU transaction, dropping Roden Frost to sign Milotic. This is just a straight up upgrade, no ifs, ands, or buts about it. Milotic, a good bulky water type down in PU. Roden Frost, typing be damned, doesn't really offer too much in the way of either offense or defensive capability without getting a nasty plot going. And then of course, because it's electric ice, has to run boots to be that effective. So Milotic, the new Terra Captain, typing Poison Steel, both very good typings for a special wall to have, and both crucially prevents Milotic from getting hit with a Toxic. Himalaya then decides to walk back their Toxicroak decision and signing Kingdra. So instead of a slower, more bulky Rain Abuser, they opt to go for another Swift Swimmer in Kingdra. So that's a great low tier pickup for Himalaya. And then you've got Mount Steel releasing Weezing and Komala at the same time and not making a signing immediately. Just what the hell are they plotting over there? Obviously, it is legal to drop mons without signing something, but why would Reen make that decision so brazenly. This is what Mount Steel was plotting, orchestrating the first trade of the season, a straight up OU for OU, giving up Ogerpon Cornerstone to Humalao in exchange for Raging Bolt, and this trade does make sense for both teams. Humalao already has Terra Latios, kind of does the same thing that Raging Bolt does, just faster. So it makes sense that they want to offload Raging Bolt in exchange for a different OU, and they get Ogerpon Cornerstone, a very good physical attacker, so that adds a dimension to the offense that Humalao did not have before. Curiously, Humalao now employs many members of the Marvel Milotics from Season 7, including top mons like Zamazenta, Pelipper, and Ogerpon Cornerstone. So we'll see just how much of that roster Humalao copies from, but on paper, this is a very good trade for both teams as they change up their offenses to suit their needs better. But that wasn't the only trade that Mount Steel was busy orchestrating. They continued to be active trading in Week 1, sending Slitherwing over to Goldenrod for Sandy Shocks and Hitmontop. So for the first time in NWBA history, that means all 8 seasons including the Gen 8 era, this is the first 1-for-2 trade that we've ever seen. Very interesting, well done by Mount Steel. Gets themselves a different piece of UU offense, as well as a Terra captain in Hitmontop after getting rid of their PUs, making Hitmontop a captain with typings in Fighting and Dark. Fighting makes a lot of sense. You want that extra boost to your stab. Obviously, Hitmontop has Mop Punch as priority and still has strong close combat, so interesting to see a 2-for-1 in NWBA history. We didn't think it'd ever be possible, but it is now. And yet, even after the 2 trades, we still have a few signings to go over. Goldenrod, now with a roster spot open, picks up Golurk and makes it a Terra captain in types in Ghost and Dark. Ghost obviously to help boost those stab poltergeists even further, and then Dark just good for a Ghost type to have as a Terra type. Mount Steel picks up Quillfish H to fulfill their open PU spot. And then lastly, literally with a very interesting decision, drops Moltres for base Ogerpon. They figure with Talonflame now on the roster, they don't need 2 fire flying types. Obviously, Moltres, a much better defensive Pokemon, but can't really fault the GM for not wanting 2 mons on the roster that kind of do the same thing on paper. And base Ogerpon, an interesting option. This is the first time we will see base Ogerpon as an OU mon. Of course, it does have the benefit of being able to change up its items, so it's going to be interesting to see how AZ employs it for the rest of the season. So with all that out of the way, let's move into our final segment of the day, the look ahead into what next week will entail, see what's on the schedule and who is going to be under the primetime lights in week 2. Looking at the week 2 schedule, Big Bluff is the team to watch. 2 matchups in the Ruby League, Kitakami and Rose Tower. So that's 2 matchups between 2-1 teams over in that league. In the Sapphire, you've got Spear Pillar taking on Mount Steel in a match that could have very big implications on the standings following week 2. That's the only undefeated team in the Sapphire versus a 2-1 team. And then we've got a stacked interleague schedule. Humalao gets to take on number 1 in the Ruby League, Lavender Town, and the previously mentioned 2-1 Kitakami. Spear Pillar's got to go up against Rose Tower, also 2-1, and then Sky Pillar, 1-2, but again, a matchup of early season championship hopefuls. And then Big Bluff to add on top of their already stacked week, another 2-1 team in Mauville, and then taking on Goldenrod. So Client Kate gets to take on his head coach in Dom, who knows what that matchup is going to look like. And finally, as we look ahead to our Versus Seeker matches of the night, we've got an interleague triple header. Kitakami faces off against Ubel and Castelia City. Mount Steel looks to continue their hot start to the season by taking on Anastar. And then Literal looks to finally get on the board, taking on Haoli. So those are 3 matchups that we're only going to see one time this season unless these teams meet in the finals. But should be a very interesting night. Those interleague matchups always produce something far more interesting than you can hope to expect with some of those wild band droids. Alright friends, that's going to end it for today's episode. Thank you all for watching. I've been your host, King Vasser. Stay tuned and stick around because coming up next, Versus Seeker triple header primetime action should be a fun night. See you there.